The tendril writhed and twisted in the air, its glowing blue veins pulsing with energy. It seemed to search for something or someone before retreating back into the rubble. The slayers stood frozen, their weapons raised but their bodies tense with exhaustion. They had destroyed the Harbinger's core, or so they thought, but it was clear now that the creature wasn't done. Not yet. We need to move, Ethan said finally, his voice firm despite the fatigue in his eyes. If it's regenerating, we don't have much time. Mia nodded, her grip tightening on her rifle. Where do we go? Back to the ship? Ethan shook his head. Not until we know for sure it's contained. If even a piece of it survives, it'll keep spreading. We find the source. It has to be here somewhere. Jake swore under his breath. You mean there's more? After all that? There's always more, Laura muttered grimly, reloading her weapon. Let's just get it over with. Ryan looked pale, his hands trembling as he clutched his rifle. What if we can't stop it? What if it's too strong? Ethan turned to him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We faced worse odds before. We stick together, and we fight smart. That's how we win. With that, they moved deeper into the ruins of the city, following the faint hum that seemed to emanate from beneath their feet. The sound grew louder as they approached an underground facility hidden beneath what appeared to be an abandoned subway station. The entrance was partially collapsed, forcing them to climb over piles of debris to reach the heavy metal door beyond. This must be where they were controlling it, Mia said, examining the rusted sign above the door. Kairos 7. Research facility. Let's hope whatever's inside gives us answers, Ethan replied, gesturing for Jake and Laura to take point. Together, they forced the door open, revealing a dark and narrow stairwell leading downward. The air inside was colder than before, carrying the faint scent of ozone and decay. Their helmet lights illuminated the walls, which were covered in the same strange symbols they'd seen on Zyderus. Each step echoed loudly, amplifying the tension in the group. No one spoke, they didn't need to. The weight of what they were about to face hung heavy in the silence dotted the bottom of the stairs. They found themselves in a large chamber filled with machinery and consoles. In the center of the room stood a massive device, a towering structure made of blackened metal and glowing conduits. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting the machine to rows of containment pods lining the walls. Inside those pods, grotesque forms floated silently, their bodies fused with biomechanical parts. What is this place? Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. It's a factory, Mia said, her tone grim. They weren't just experimenting on the shadows, they were creating them. Ethan studied the central machine, his mind racing. This is the heart of it. Destroy this, and we might end it for good. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to shake. The hum grew deafening as the machine came to life, its conduits pulsing with blue light. From the shadows emerged the Harbinger, or at least what remained of it. Its form was incomplete, jagged edges of metal and flesh shifting unnaturally as it loomed over them. You wanted answers, Ethan said, raising his rifle. Now we finish it. The battle was chaos. The Harbinger lashed out with incredible speed, its movements unpredictable and relentless. Ethan fired repeatedly, aiming for the glowing nodes scattered across its body. Each shot struck true, causing the creature to stagger, but it healed almost instantly, its wounds sealing shut as if nothing had happened. Mia hurled a grenade, its base, the explosion sending shockwaves through the chamber. For a moment, the Harbinger faltered, giving the team a chance to regroup, but it recovered quickly, slamming Jake into a nearby console with one of its appendages. He collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. Jake! Laura shouted, rushing to his side. She dragged him behind cover as the others continued to fight. Ethan spotted a control panel near the central machine and sprinted toward it, dodging the Harbinger's attacks. He slammed his fist against the interface, trying to access the system. I need time, he yelled to the others. We'll buy you some. Mia responded, firing wildly to distract the creature. Ryan joined her, his aim improving as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Together, they managed to hold the Harbinger at bay while Ethan worked. Finally, the screen flickered to life, displaying a single option: initiate core meltdown. Ethan hesitated for only a second before pressing the button. Alarms blared as the machine began to destabilize, its glow intensifying with each passing second. "It's working!" Ethan shouted. "Get out of here!" The team didn't need to be told twice. They ran for the exit, the Harbinger roaring in rage behind them. As they reached the stairwell, the machine erupted in a blinding flash of light, sending a wave of heat and energy surging through the chamber. The force knocked them off their feet, tumbling down the stairs and into the subway station below. When the dust settled, Ethan pushed himself up, coughing as smoke filled the air. One by one, the others followed suit, their bodies battered but alive. The facility above them was gone, reduced to rubble by the explosion. Did we kill it?" Ryan asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, looking back at the wreckage. "But we hurt it. Badly." Mia nodded, her expression resolute. "That's enough for now. Let's get back to the ship." As they climbed aboard their vessel and prepared for liftoff, none of them noticed a faint crackle of static coming from Ethan's helmet comms. A distorted voice whispered a single word: "Survivors." Back at Command HQ, Grayson watched the live feed from their mission, his expression unreadable. When the transmission cut out, he turned to his assistant. "Prepare the next phase. Humanity needs heroes now more than ever." Outside, the sun set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. The war was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope. And sometimes that was enough. The next morning, the Slayer team gathered in the command center for their final briefing. The room was filled with tension, the kind that made it hard to breathe. Maps and holographic displays floated above the table in the center of the room, showing key locations across the galaxy where shadow activity had been detected. Colonel Grayson stood at the head of the table, his expression grim but resolute. "Operation Black Dawn begins now," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Your mission is clear. Locate and neutralize any signs of shadow infestation. We've identified 3 primary targets planets where the Harbinger's influence is strongest. Each team will be assigned to one location. Failure is not an option." Ethan glanced at his teammates, their faces a mix of determination and fear. They all knew what was at stake. If they couldn't stop the Harbinger, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. But none of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Grayson continued, pointing to the first planet on the map. "This is Cairo 7. Reports indicate heavy shadow activity in the capital city. Your objective is to secure the area and eliminate any threats. Once done, you'll move to the next target." Mia raised her hand slightly, hesitant to interrupt. "What about reinforcements? Are we going in alone again?" "For now," Grayson replied. "We're stretched thin as it is. Other teams are being deployed to different sectors, but communication will be limited. Trust your instincts and rely on each other. That's all you can do." Jake muttered something under his breath, but Ethan shot him a warning glance. Now wasn't the time for arguments. They had a job to do. As the briefing ended, the team returned to the barracks to gear up. Ethan checked his rifle methodically, ensuring every bolt was loaded and ready. Mia did the same, her movement steady, despite the unease in her eyes. Ryan sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at his weapon like it might bite him. Laura and Jake worked silently, double-checking their supplies and armor. "You okay?" Ethan asked Ryan, noticing the younger Slayer's hesitation. Ryan looked up, forcing a weak smile. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "What happens if we don't make it?" Ryan admitted. "I mean, this isn't like Zythorus. This is bigger, scarier. What if we're walking into a trap?" Ethan knelt beside him, his voice low but firm. "We've faced worse odds before, and we've always come out on top. You just have to focus on the mission one step at a time. Understand?" Ryan nodded, though his hands were still trembling. Got it. When they were ready, the team boarded their ship and launched into orbit. The journey to Cairo 7 would take several hours, giving them time to rest or try to. Ethan sat in the cockpit, staring out at the endless expanse of space. His mind kept drifting back to Grayson's words. Was this really humanity's last stand? Or was there more to the story? Mia joined him after a while, sitting quietly in the co-pilot's seat. You're worried, she said softly. It's hard not to be, Ethan replied. Something about this feels wrong, like we're missing a piece of the puzzle. Mia nodded. I feel it too. Grayson's hiding something. I just don't know what. Maybe we'll find out on Cairo 7, Ethan said, though he didn't sound convinced. Hours later, the ship descended on the Cairo 7 surface. The planet was a stark contrast to Xylarus. Its cities gleamed with towering skyscrapers and sprawling highways, remnants of a once thriving civilization. But now, those same structures stood in ruins, their walls scorched and windows shattered. Smoke rose from distant fires, and the air smelled of ash and decay. This place looks like a graveyard, Jake muttered as they stepped onto the cracked pavement. Stay sharp, Ethan ordered, raising his rifle. We don't know what's waiting for us. The streets were eerily quiet, devoid of life. Cars lay abandoned in the middle of intersections, their doors hanging open as if their owners had fled in a hurry. Posters and billboards lined the buildings, advertising products and events that no longer existed. It was as if the entire planet had been frozen in time. Its people vanished without a trace dot as they moved deeper into the city. The silence was broken by a faint hum of sound that sent chills down their spines. It grew louder as they approached a massive structure in the distance, a domed building that seemed untouched by the destruction around it. That's our target, Ethan said, pointing ahead. Let's move. They reached the entrance cautiously, finding the door sealed shut. Laura knelt to examine the locking mechanism, her fingers working quickly to override it. With a loud hiss, the door slid open, revealing a dark interior. Inside, the air was cold and stale, carrying the scent of rust and oil. The walls were lined with rows of pods, similar to the ones they'd seen on Xylarus. Most were empty, but a few contained grotesque forms suspended in amber-like fluid. Shadows shifted within the liquid, their shapes distorted but unmistakable. Looks like we found the source, Mia whispered, her voice tight, before anyone could respond. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. A low growl echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of skittering footsteps. Shadows emerged from the corners, their glowing eyes fixed on the slayers. Here we go again, Jake muttered, raising his rifle. The shadows attacked in waves, their movements erratic but deadly. Ethan fired repeatedly, his shots lighting up the room as they struck the biomechanical creatures. But for every shadow they destroyed, two more took its place. They were outnumbered and outmatched. Fall back, Ethan shouted, leading the team toward the exit. But as they turned to retreat, the ground beneath them began to shake. A section of the floor collapsed, revealing a massive chamber below. In the center of the chamber stood the Harbinger, or at least part of it. Its form was shifting and unstable, pulsating with the same blue light as the orb they destroyed. On Xylarus, tentacle-like appendages lashed out, striking at the slayers with incredible speed. We need to disable it, Mia yelled, firing a grenade directly at the creature's core. The explosion sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber, causing the Harbinger to recoil momentarily. But it recovered almost instantly, its body regenerating as if the attack had barely scratched it. Ethan cursed under his breath, realizing they couldn't win this fight head-on. We need to overload the power source, he shouted. Find the control panel. Laura spotted it first, a console embedded in the wall near the chamber's edge. She sprinted toward it, dodging the Harbinger's attacks as she worked to access the system. I'm in, she called out, initiating overload sequence. The Harbinger roared, its rage palpable as it lunged toward Laura. Jake intercepted it, firing wildly to draw its attention. "Go! Do it!" he yelled, his voice strained Dot with a final keystroke. Laura activated the overload. Alarms blared as the chamber began to collapse, chunks of debris falling from the ceiling. "Let's move!" Ethan shouted, grabbing Laura and pulling her toward the exit. The team ran as fast as they could, the Harbinger's shrieks echoing behind them. Just as they reached the surface, the building exploded in a burst of blue light, sending a shockwave rippling across the city. They stopped to catch their breath, watching as smoke and flames consumed the remains of the structure. For a moment, it seemed like they'd won. But then, from the wreckage, a single tendril emerged, writhing and pulsating with energy. "It's still alive," Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "Then we keep fighting." And with that, they prepared for the next battle, knowing the war was far from over. The Slayer ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot as it pierced the thick layers of clouds. Inside, the team sat in silence, their bodies bruised and battered but alive. The encounter with the creature's ship had left them shaken, and none of them could shake the feeling that they'd been spared for a reason. Ethan stared out the viewport, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. Why had the creature let them go? What did it want? And what would happen next? As the ship touched down on the landing pad at Command HQ, a group of technicians rushed forward to inspect the damage. The Slayers disembarked slowly, their boots clanging against the metal ramp. A tall man in a crisp uniform approached them, his expression unreadable. It was Colonel Grayson, the head of Slayer operations. "Report," he said sharply, his eyes scanning the group. "What happened on Zythris?" Ethan stepped forward, his posture rigid. "We found evidence of an abandoned experiment involving biomechanical entities. The outpost was overrun by hostile creature shadows and a larger entity that attacked us directly. We destroyed their control source, but the threat isn't neutralized." Grayson frowned, his gaze narrowing. "Control source? Explain." Mia handed him the data pad containing the logs from the outpost. These logs mentioned experiments with energy manipulation and containment breaches. Whatever they were working on, it got out of hand. Those creatures, the shadows, are likely the result. Grayson scrolled through the information, his expression darkening with each passing second. Finally, he looked up, his voice low and urgent. "This changes everything. You've stumbled onto something far bigger than we anticipated." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his tone cautious. He didn't trust Grayson, not entirely. The lack of backup on Zythris still weighed heavily on his mind. Grayson hesitated, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. "Follow me," he said finally, turning on his heel and walking toward the command center. The Slayers exchanged uneasy glances, but followed without question. Inside the command center, rows of monitors displayed maps, schematics, and live feeds from various locations across the galaxy. Grayson led them to a private briefing room, where he closed the door behind them. The tension in the air was palpable as he turned to face the group. The outpost on Zythris wasn't just abandoned. He began, his voice barely above a whisper. It was sealed off after a classified project went wrong. Project Umbra. The goal was to harness dark energy for military use, but something escaped. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "You mean the shadows?" Grayson nodded grimly. "And, worse, the shadows are only the beginning. They're fragments of a larger entity, a being we call the Harbinger. It's intelligent, adaptive, and nearly indestructible. Destroying the orb may have disrupted its connection to the shadows temporarily, but it won't stop it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you tell us this before sending us in?" "We didn't know the full extent of the threat until now," Grayson replied. "Your mission was reconnaissance. We needed confirmation of what we suspected. Now that we have it, we can act." "Act how?" Mia asked, her voice sharp. "That thing chased us into space. If it finds Earth, It won't, Grayson interrupted. Not yet, but we need to prepare. That's why I'm authorizing Operation Black Dawn. Laura crossed her arms. What's that? A counteroffensive, Grayson explained. We'll gather every available Slayer unit and deploy them to key locations across the galaxy. Our goal is to contain the Harbinger and prevent it from spreading further. It's risky, but it's our best chance, Jake scoffed. Sounds like a suicide mission. It might be, Grayson admitted. But if we fail, humanity doesn't stand a chance. Ethan studied the colonel carefully, searching for any sign of deception. For once, Grayson seemed sincere. Still, Ethan couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that they were being used as pawns in a much larger game. When do we start? He asked finally. Immediately, Grayson replied. I'll brief your team personally. In the meantime, get some rest. You've earned it. The Slayers filed out of the briefing room, their thoughts heavy with uncertainty. As they walked through the corridors of HQ, Ryan finally broke the silence. So, what do we do now? He asked nervously. Fight until we die? No one's dying, Ethan said firmly. Not if I have anything to say about it. We'll follow orders for now, but we keep our eyes open. Something about this feels off. Mia nodded in agreement. Grayson's hiding something. He knows more than he's telling us. Doesn't he always? Jake muttered, shaking his head. Still, if the Harbinger is real, we don't have much choice. We fight or we run, and running doesn't sound like an option. They reached the barracks, where bunks lined the walls and lockers stood along one side. The room was quiet, save for the hum of overhead lights. Ethan dropped his gear on a nearby table and sank onto a bunk, his head in his hands. Mia sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. You think Grayson sent us to Zytheris knowing we'd find the Harbinger? She asked quietly. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But I wouldn't put it past him. He's playing chess, and we're just pieces on the board. Mia sighed, leaning back against the wall. If that's true, then we need to figure out his endgame before it's too late. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. Agreed. 4. Now we stick to the plan, but we stay vigilant. Trust no one, not even each other. As the others settled into their bunks, Laura pulled Ethan aside. You think we can win this? She asked, her voice unusually soft. Ethan hesitated, weighing his words carefully. I don't know, but we have to try. If we don't, who will? Laura nodded, though her expression remained troubled. She returned to her bunk, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He stared at the ceiling, his mind replaying the events on Zytheris. The shadows, the Harbinger, the orb, they were all connected. Part of a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. But one thing was clear. Whatever came next, it would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. Hours passed, and the barracks grew quiet as the others drifted off to sleep. Ethan lay awake, staring into the darkness. His body ached, and his mind was exhausted, but sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Harbinger's glowing eyes, felt the weight of its presence bearing down on him. It wasn't just a creature, it was a force, ancient and relentless. And it wanted something. Something it hadn't gotten yet. Finally unable to bear the silence any longer, Ethan rose from his bunk and slipped out of the barracks. The halls of HQ were dimly lit, the hum of machinery providing a steady backdrop to his restless pacing. He wandered aimlessly, his thoughts spiraling, until he found himself outside the command center. Through the glass windows, he could see Grayson seated at a desk, poring over documents and schematics. Something about the scene struck Ethan as odd. Why was Grayson still working at this hour? Curiosity got the better of him. He entered the command center quietly, careful not to alert the colonel. Grayson glanced up briefly, then returned his attention to the papers in front of him. Can't sleep? He asked, his tone neutral. Ethan shook his head. Too much on my mind. Grayson gestured for him to sit. Understandable. This mission has been challenging. That's one word for it, Ethan replied, taking a seat. Mind if I ask you something? Go ahead. Why us? Why send a single team to Zytheris instead of a full squad? Grayson leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. Because I needed answers without drawing attention. If I'd sent an entire fleet, it would have tipped off the wrong people. What wrong people? Ethan pressed. Grayson hesitated, then sighed. There are factions within command who believe the Harbinger can be controlled. They see it as a weapon, not a threat. If they knew what you found on Zytheris, they'd exploit it no matter the cost. Ethan's stomach churned. So we're expendable. No, Grayson said firmly. You're essential. Without you, we'd never have uncovered the truth. But make no mistake, this fight is far from over. And if we lose, humanity loses everything. Ethan stood, his fist clenched. Then let's hope we're ready. As he left the command center, Ethan realized the truth. They weren't just fighting the Harbinger. They were fighting for survival. And the odds were stacked against them. The Slayers moved quickly through the darkened corridors of the outpost, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Ethan led the way, his rifle raised and his eyes scanning every shadow for movement. Behind him, Mia clutched the glowing orb. Tightly, its faint blue light casting strange patterns on the walls. Ryan stayed close to her, his earlier panic replaced by a grim determination. Laura and Jake brought up the rear, their weapons ready for any sign of trouble. The air felt heavier, now almost suffocating, as if the outpost itself was alive and watching them. Every step they took seemed to echo louder than the last, making it hard to tell if they were truly alone. Ethan glanced over his shoulder at the group, his expression unreadable behind his helmet visor. They were all exhausted, their nerves stretched thin after the encounter with the shadows, but there was no time to rest. The sooner they got off this planet, the better. Almost there, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Just a few more minutes. Mia nodded, though her grip on the orb tightened. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The orb had stopped the shadows back in the chamber, but it wasn't destroyed. It was still active, pulsing, faintly in her hands. What if removing it hadn't solved the problem? What if they'd only made things worse? As they approached the entrance to the outpost, the beam of their helmet lights caught something unusual on the floor ahead. It was another handprint, burned into the metal like the one they'd seen earlier, but this one was fresh. The edges were still glowing faintly, as if whatever had made it had passed through only moments ago. Hold up, Ethan said, raising a fist to signal the team to stop. He crouched down to examine the mark, running his fingers along its jagged edges. This is new, Jake cursed under his breath. You mean those things are still out there? Looks like it, Ethan replied, standing up. We need to move faster. But before they could take another step, a low hum filled the air. It started softly, almost imperceptible, but quickly grew louder, vibrating through the walls and floor. The team exchanged uneasy glances, unsure what was happening. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently, plunging the corridor into darkness. For a moment, no one moved. The hum continued, growing louder and more intense, until it became almost deafening. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The lights came back on, revealing a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was tall and humanoid, but its body was a mix of organic and mechanical parts. Its skin shimmered like liquid metal, and its eyes glowed with the same blue light as the orb. Unlike the shadows they'd fought earlier, this one was different, larger, more solid, and radiating an aura of power that made their skin crawl. Who or what is that? Ryan whispered, his voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he raised his rifle and fired a shot directly at the creature's chest. The bolt struck true, leaving a smoking crater in its metallic surface. But instead of collapsing or retreating, the creature simply stood there, unmoving. Slowly, the damaged area began to repair itself. the liquid-like material flowing back together as if nothing had happened. "It can heal itself," Mia said, her voice tight with fear. "We can't kill it." The creature tilted its head slightly, studying them with cold, calculating eyes. Then, without warning, it lunged forward with incredible speed, covering the distance between them in seconds. Ethan barely had time to shout a warning before it slammed into him, sending him crashing into the wall. "Ethan!" Mia yelled, firing her rifle at the creature. Her shots hit their mark, forcing it to stagger backward, but it recovered almost. Instantly, its movements unerringly fluid. Laura and Jake joined the fight, their plasma bolts lighting up the corridor as they tried to overwhelm the creature. But no matter how many times they hit it, it kept coming, its wounds healing faster than they could inflict them. Ryan fired wildly, his aim erratic, but even his shots did little to slow it down. "Fall back!" Ethan shouted, pushing himself to his feet. His armor was dented where the creature had struck him, and blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but he ignored the pain. "We can't win this fight!" The team retreated down the corridor, the creature following closely behind. Its movements were deliberate, almost playful, as if it was toying with them. Every few steps, it would lash out, forcing them to dodge or risk being struck. Despite their best efforts, they were losing ground fast. Mia glanced at the orb in her hands, her mind racing. If the shadows had been controlled by the orb, maybe this creature was too. Could destroying it weaken it? Or would it make things worse? She didn't have time to think it through. The creature was gaining on them, its glowing eyes fixed on her like a predator stalking its prey. "We need to get outside," Ethan yelled, leading the way toward the exit. "If we can draw it into the open, maybe we'll have a better chance." They burst out of the outpost and onto the rocky plateau where their ship waited. The wind howled around them, carrying with it the scent of rust and decay. The creature emerged from the shadows of the entrance, pausing for a moment to assess its surroundings. Its glowing eyes scanned the area, lingering on the ship before turning back to the Slayers. "Now what?" Jake demanded, his voice tinged with desperation. "We can't fight it, and we can't run forever." Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted from the creature to the orb in Mia's hands, then to the ship. An idea began to form in his mind, risky and dangerous, but possibly their only chance. "Mia," he said, his tone urgent, "when I give the signal, throw the orb as far away from us as you can. Aim for the edge of the plateau." Mia stared at him, confusion and fear written across her face. "What are you planning?" "Just trust me," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "Everyone else, get to the ship and prepare for takeoff. As soon as Mia throws the orb, we leave. No hesitation." The team hesitated for a moment, unsure if they should follow such a reckless plan. But the creature chose that moment to charge, again, forcing them to scatter. Ethan fired repeatedly at it, drawing its attention while Mia backed away, clutching the orb tightly. "Now!" Ethan shouted, diving to the side as the creature swiped at him. Mia didn't hesitate. With all her strength, she hurled the orb toward the edge of the plateau. It sailed through the air, glowing brighter as it neared the ground. The creature froze mid-motion, its head snapping toward the orb as if sensing its presence. For a brief moment, it seemed uncertain, torn between pursuing the Slayers and retrieving the orb. Then, with a speed that defied logic, it raced after the orb, its movements blurring as it closed the distance. Before it could reach it, the orb struck the ground and shattered, releasing a blinding burst of blue light. The force of the explosion knocked the Slayers off their feet, sending shockwaves rippling across the plateau. When the light faded, the creature was gone. In its place was a scorched crater, smoking and lifeless. The air smelled of ozone and burnt metal, and the wind carried the faint hum of residual energy. Ethan pushed himself to his knees, wincing as pain shot through his side. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. One by one, the others responded, their voices shaky but alive. Ryan was the last to stand, his legs trembling as he struggled to his feet. Did we kill it? I don't know, Ethan admitted, looking at the crater. But we hurt it, badly. Mia walked over to him, her face pale but resolute. What about the shadows? Are they gone too? Ethan shook his head. I don't think so. Destroying the orb might have disrupted their control, but I doubt it. Wipe them out completely. This isn't over. As the team boarded the ship and prepared for liftoff, none of them noticed a faint glow emanating from deep within the crater. Whatever the orb had contained, it wasn't entirely gone. And somewhere, in the darkness, something stirred. The ship lifted off the rocky plateau with a roar, its engines glowing brightly against the dark red sky of Zyderus. Inside, the Slayers sat in silence, their bodies battered and their minds heavy with unanswered questions. Ethan leaned back. In his seat, his hand pressed against the cut on his forehead to stop the bleeding. Mia sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the orb-shaped burn mark on her gloves. Ryan stared out the viewport, his face pale as he watched the planet shrink beneath them. Laura and Jake were busy checking their weapons and gear, though neither said a word. Ethan broke the quiet first. We got lucky back there, he said, his voice low but steady. But luck won't save us next time. Mia nodded slowly. That creature? It wasn't like the shadows. It was stronger, smarter, and it wanted the orb. Maybe it was the orb, Laura suggested, looking up from her rifle. Or at least part of it. That thing didn't seem alive. It felt more like an extension of whatever power the orb held. Jake snorted. Great, so we just blew up a piece of alien tech that might have been controlling everything down there. Real smart move. It worked, didn't it? Ethan shot back, his tone sharp. We're still breathing, aren't we? That's more than I can say for anyone else who's gone near that outpost. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What if it comes after us? What if blowing up the orb made it angry? Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. The young Slayer had a point, even if it was poorly timed. They destroyed the orb, but they hadn't seen any proof that the shadows or the creature were truly gone. For all they knew, they'd only delayed the inevitable. We'll deal with that when it happens, Ethan said finally. 4. Now let's focus on getting home and reporting what we found. Mia frowned. Do you really think Command will believe us? A biomechanical army controlled by some kind of energy source? It sounds insane. That's why we have evidence, Ethan replied, nodding toward the datapad Laura was holding. Those logs from the outpost, there are proof. If we can show Command what those scientists were working on, maybe they'll take this seriously. Laura handed the datapad to Ethan. It's not much, but it's something. There are mentions of experiments, energy readings, and warnings about instability. Not exactly a smoking gun, but enough to raise alarms. As the ship continued its ascent, Mia glanced out the viewport, her thoughts racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they'd missed something important back at the outpost. Something crucial. The symbols etched into the walls, the containment chambers, the glowing orb, all of it pointed to a level of technology far beyond anything humanity had encountered before. And yet, no one had mentioned the outpost in decades. Why? Why did they abandon it? She asked aloud, breaking the silence. If they were working on something so dangerous, why didn't they destroy it completely? Ethan shrugged. Maybe they tried. Or maybe they thought sealing it off would be enough. Either way, they underestimated whatever they were dealing with. And now we're paying the price, Jake muttered under his breath. The conversation died down as the ship entered orbit around Zyderus. Below them, the planet looked eerily peaceful, its jagged mountains and barren plains bathed in the dim light of its twin suns. But none of the Slayers felt any sense of relief. They'd escaped the shadows and the creature for now, but they knew the danger wasn't over. Whatever had been unleashed on Zyderus wasn't confined to the planet's surface. It was only a matter of time before it spread. Ethan tapped a few buttons on the control panel, opening a comms channel to their base on Earth. Static crackled through the speakers before a familiar voice responded. "Control, this is Slayer Team Alpha. We read you loud and clear." "This is Control," came the reply. "Status report, Alpha?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Mission partially successful. Outpost secured, but situation unstable. Request immediate debrief upon return." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a clipped response. "Acknowledge. Prepare for re-entry and stand by for further instructions." As the channel closed, Mia noticed the tension in Ethan's posture. He didn't trust Control, not fully, and she couldn't blame him. Their mission had been shrouded in secrecy from the start, and the lack of reinforcements or backup had raised too many red flags. "What's bothering you?" she asked quietly, leaning closer so the others wouldn't hear. Ethan glanced at her, his expression guarded. "Something doesn't add up. Why send us alone? Why wait until now to investigate an abandoned outpost? And why hasn't anyone else shown interest in this place for decades?" Mia frowned. "You think they knew about the shadows?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But I'm starting to wonder if we were sent there for reasons beyond what we were told." Before Mia could respond, the ship rocked violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared as warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Ethan grabbed the controls, his hands moving quickly to stabilize the vessel. "What's happening?" Ryan shouted, gripping his seat tightly. "Something hit us," Jake yelled, pointing out the viewport. In the distance, a massive shape was visible, a sleek, black craft that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. It moved with unnatural speed, circling the ship before firing another blast of energy. "Shields are holding for now," Ethan said, his voice tense. "But we can't outrun it." Mia's heart raced as she realized what or who they were facing. "It's the creature. It's following us. How is that possible?" Laura demanded, her voice rising. "We left it on the planet." "I don't know how," Ethan snapped, "but we need to fight back. Laura, take the turret. Jake, help me with the controls. Everyone else, brace yourselves." Laura scrambled to the rear of the ship, where a mounted plasma cannon was positioned. She fired repeatedly at the enemy craft, her shots lighting up the darkness of space. The creature's ship dodged most of the blasts, weaving and twisting with impossible agility. When it retaliated, the impact rattled the entire vessel, sending sparks flying from the control panel. "We're losing power," Ethan shouted, struggling to keep the ship steady. "Mia, see if you can reroute auxiliary systems." Mia climbed into the co-pilot's seat, her fingers flying over the console as she worked to restore critical functions. Behind her, Ryan clung to his seat, his face pale with fear. "Are we going to die?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No," Ethan said firmly, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. "Not today." Just as the situation seemed hopeless, the creature's ship suddenly veered away, disappearing into the void of space. The alarms stopped blaring, and the ship stabilized, leaving the Slayers in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "Why did it leave?" Ethan stared out the viewport, his jaw tight. "I don't know, but I doubt it's gone for good." As the ship resumed its course toward Earth, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the creature's retreat wasn't an act of mercy. It had let them go for now, but it had a purpose, something driving it. And whatever it wasn't finished with them yet. The Slayers stood frozen in the dimly lit corridor, their weapons still aimed at the shadows that had moments ago seemed alive with movement. The silence was deafening now, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of the thinned outpost's failing power system. Ethan scanned the area carefully, his eyes darting from one dark corner to another. He didn't lower his rifle, even though nothing appeared to be moving anymore. "Stay alert," he said, his voice low but firm. "Whatever that was, it's not gone." Mia nodded, her fingers tightening around the grip of her plasma rifle. She glanced back at Ryan, who looked pale and shaken. His earlier outbursts had put them all on edge, and while Ethan hadn't reprimanded him yet, Mia could tell the young slave was beating himself up over it. "We need answers," Mia said, breaking the tense silence. "This place has been abandoned for decades." "Who sent that distress signal, and why?" Ethan agreed. They couldn't afford to waste time guessing. If there were survivors or worse, hostiles, they needed to find out sooner rather than later. He signaled for the team to move forward, keeping their formation tight as they pressed deeper into the outpost. The next room they entered was a mess. Desks and chairs were overturned, papers scattered across the floor like confetti. A large terminal sat against one wall, its screen cracked but still functional. Laura moved toward it, brushing debris aside as she examined the controls. "This might have something," she said, tapping at the keyboard. After a few seconds, the screen flickered to life, displaying fragmented logs from the last days of the outpost operation. Ethan and Mia joined her, reading over her shoulder as the logs scrolled by. Most of the entries were technical jargon about experiments and energy readings, but one caught their attention. It was dated just days before the outpost went dark. "Subject containment breach. Shadows are spreading faster than predicted. Evacuation protocols initiated, but communication lines are failing. Power fluctuations causing instability throughout the facility. We've lost contact with Sector B, requests immediate reinforcements." The log ended abruptly, leaving more questions than answers. Ethan frowned, his jaw tightening. "Shadows? What does that mean?" Jake shrugged, his usual scowl deepening. "Sounds like nonsense if you ask me. Probably some scientists losing their mind." But Mia wasn't so quick to dismiss it. She pointed to another entry further down the screen. "Look at this. Biomechanical entities exhibiting adaptive behavior. That doesn't sound like paranoia. It sounds like they created something dangerous." Laura nodded slowly. "If these things are biomechanical, they're not natural. Someone built them, or at least tried to control them. And judging by the state of this place, it didn't go well." Before anyone could respond, Ryan let out a sharp gasp. He was standing near the far side of the room, staring at something on the floor. The others turned to see what had caught his attention. It was a handprint burn into the metal plating of the wall. The edges were jagged, as if seared by extreme heat, and the size was unnaturally large. "That's not human," Mia whispered, her voice tinged with unease. Ethan stepped closer, examining the mark. "Whatever made this, it's strong, and it's still here." As if on cue, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness for a split second. When they came back on, Jake swore under his breath. "We're sitting ducks in here. Let's get out before whatever it is decides to show itself." Ethan hesitated, weighing their options. They needed more information, but staying in the open like this was too risky. He made a decision. "We split up. Laura and Jake, stay here and keep digging through these logs. See if you can find anything useful. Mia, Ryan, and I will check the nearby sectors. Stick together and report back in 10 minutes." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but Laura silenced him with a glare. "Got it, boss," she said, already turning back to the terminal. With that settled, Ethan led Mia and Ryan out of the room and into the next corridor. The air felt colder here, almost icy, and the walls were covered in strange symbols etched into the metal. Some looked like writing, while others resembled intricate patterns or designs. Ethan ran his gloved hand over one of the markings, feeling a faint vibration beneath his fingertips. "What do you think they mean?" Ryan asked. Nervously. "No idea," Ethan replied. "But they weren't here when this place was operational. Something's changed since then." They continued down the hallway until they reached a set of double doors. The sign above reads Sector B, Restricted Access. Ethan pushed the doors open cautiously, revealing a long, narrow passage lined with glass observation windows. On the other side of the glass, rows of containment chambers stretched as far as they could see. Most were empty, but a few contained grotesque shapes suspended in a thick amber-like substance. The forms inside were humanoid but distorted, with elongated limbs and featureless faces. Ryan gagged, taking a step back. What are those? Experiments, Nia said grimly. Looks like they were trying to merge organic matter with machines. Guess we know where the shadows came from. Ethan studied the chambers closely, noticing that several of them were cracked or shattered. Their contents spilled onto the floor. Whatever had been trapped inside was no longer contained. He turned to Mia. We should... His words were cut off by a loud clang from behind him. All three whirled around, weapons raised, but there was nothing in sight. The noise echoed again, louder this time, coming from farther down the corridor. Ryan's hands trembled as he gripped his rifle tighter. It's following us, he whispered. Ethan shook his head. Not necessarily. Could be residual damage from the breach. Either way, we need to move. They hurried down the passage, their footsteps echoing loudly in the confined space. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a massive blast door. A red light blinked steadily above it, indicating it was locked. Ethan tapped the control panel beside the door, but nothing happened. Manual override, Mia suggested, kneeling to inspect the mechanism below the panel. She pulled out a small toolkit from her belt and began working on the wires. While she worked, Ryan kept glancing over his shoulder, his anxiety growing with each passing second. Hurry up, he urged. I don't like this place. Neither. Do one, Ethan muttered, keeping his rifle trained on the darkness behind him. But panicking won't help us. Finally, Mia gave a satisfied grunt. Got it. With a loud hiss, the blast door slid open, revealing a wide chamber beyond. The room was dominated by a towering machine in the center, its surface covered in blinking lights and pulsating conduits. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting the device to various consoles and monitors. In the middle of the chaos stood a single pedestal, atop which rested a glowing orb. What is that thing? Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan approached cautiously, his eyes narrowing as he studied the orb. It pulsed with an eerie blue light, casting strange shadows across the room. It's some kind of energy source, he said. Probably what powered the experiments. Mia joined him, her expression thoughtful. If we disable it, we might shut down whatever's controlling the shadows. Before Ethan could respond, the orb flared brightly, forcing them to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the room was no longer empty. Figures emerged from the shadows, their forms shifting and twisting unnaturally. They were tall and thin, with elongated limbs and jagged edges protruding from their bodies. Their eyes glowed with the same blue light as the orb, and their movements were jerky yet deliberate. The shadows, Mia breathed, raising her rifle. Ethan didn't hesitate. Fire! The Slayers opened fire, their plasma bolts lighting up the room as they struck the biomechanical creatures. But the shadows moved faster than expected, dodging most of the shots with unnatural agility. One lunged at Ryan, knocking him to the ground. Ethan spun around, firing repeatedly until the creature collapsed in a heap of smoking metal and flesh. Get up, Ethan shouted, pulling Ryan to his feet. Stay close. Mia fired a grenade into the cluster of shadows, sending several of them flying backward. For a moment, it seemed like they might gain the upper hand. But more shadows poured into the fort, room emerging from the walls and ceiling, as if summoned by the orb itself. We can't hold them off forever. Mia yelled over the din of gunfire and screeching metal. Ethan glanced at the pedestal, then at the orb glowing ominously atop it. There was only one option left. Cover me, he ordered, sprinting toward the machine. Mia and Ryan did their best to keep the shadows at bay as Ethan reached the pedestal. He grabbed the orb, feeling its heat burn through his gloves. With a grunt of effort, he yanked it free, causing the entire room to shudder violently. The shadows froze mid-motion. their glowing eyes dimming as the orb's light faded. "Fall back!" Ethan shouted, clutching the orb tightly as he ran back to join the others. They retreated as quickly as they could, the shadows collapsing into inert heaps behind them. By the time they reached the main corridor, the outpost was eerily quiet. Once more, Laura and Jake met them halfway, their expressions a mix of relief and confusion. "What happened?" Laura demanded. "No time to explain," Ethan said, handing the orb to Mia. "Let's get out of here." As they made their way back to the ship, none of them noticed a faint crackle of static coming from Ethan's helmet coms. A distorted voice whispered a single word: failure. The planet Xythorus loomed large in the viewport of the small spacecraft as it descended through layers of swirling clouds. It was a desolate world, its surface scarred by jagged mountains and endless stretches of barren plains. The sky above was an eerie mix of deep reds and purples, casting long shadows across the terrain below. Inside the ship, 5 figures sat in silence, their faces illuminated only by the faint glow of control panels. They were Slayer's elite soldiers bred and trained for one purpose: to fight humanity's most dangerous enemies. Ethan Cole leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his seat. He was tall, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His dark hair was cropped short, a regulation cut for all Slayers. Beside him sat Mia Lewis, her expression calm but alert. Her brown eyes scanned the screens in front of her, checking readings and coordinates. She had a quiet confidence about them, the kind that came from years of experience. Though they rarely spoke during missions, there was an unspoken bond between them, a trust forged in countless battles. Behind them, 3 other members of the squad prepared for landing. Ryan, the youngest of the group, fidgeted nervously with his weapon. He was barely out of training, and this was his first real mission. Across from him, Laura adjusted the straps on her armor, her movement steady and deliberate. She was older than the others, with streaks of gray in her blonde hair, but no less formidable. Finally, there was Jake, a burly man with a perpetual scowl etched onto his face. He checked his ammunition clips one last time before leaning back in his chair, muttering something under his breath. "Approaching drop zone," Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was low and firm, commanding attention without raising it. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into." Mia nodded, glancing at the data pad in her lap. "Intel says the outpost hasn't been operational for decades, but someone or something sent out a distress signal 2 days ago. Whoever it was, they didn't stick around to wait for help." Jake grunted. "Probably got themselves killed already. Waste of our time if you ask me." "No one asked you," Laura snapped, shooting him a glare. "If there's even a chance survivors are still down there, we go in. That's the job." Ethan ignored the bickering, focusing instead on the task ahead. The outpost wasn't just any abandoned facility. It was a relic of humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Built centuries ago as a research station, it had been shut down after reports of strange phenomena began surfacing. Some claimed the experiments conducted there had opened portals to other dimensions. Others whispered about alien artifacts discovered deep beneath the planet's surface. Whatever the truth was, the outpost had been sealed off and forgotten until now. As the ship touched down on a rocky plateau near the entrance to the outpost, the team geared up in silence. Each member carried a standard-issue plasma rifle, along with grenades and medical kits strapped to their belts. Ethan gave the final briefing before opening the hatch. "We move fast and stay together," he instructed, his tone leaving no room for argument. "No heroics. If anything feels off, you call it out immediately. Got it?" Everyone nodded, though. Ryan looked pale. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "You'll do fine," he said quietly. "Just stick close." The air outside was cold and thin, making it hard to breathe without the assistance of their helmets' filtration systems. The wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of rust and decay. The outpost stood ahead of them, its metal walls corroded and crumbling. Once sleek and modern, it now resembled a tuna place where secrets went to die. Ethan led the way, his rifle raised as he scanned the area for threats. The entrance was partially blocked by debris, forcing them to climb over piles of twisted metal and shattered glass. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Only the beams of their helmet lights pierced the gloom, revealing corridors lined with broken equipment and overturned furniture. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their boots crunching against the floor. "This place gives me the creeps," Ryan muttered, his voice trembling slightly. "Keep it together," Mia said sharply. "We're not here to sightsee." They moved deeper into the outpost, searching for clues about who or what had sent the distress signal. Along the way, they found signs of a struggle. Scorch marks marred the walls, and bloodstains smeared the floors. In one room, they discovered a pile of discarded uniforms, torn and singed as if burned by some intense heat. Laura knelt to examine them, her brow furrowing. "These look fresh," she said. "Whoever was here didn't leave willingly." Ethan frowned, his instincts telling him they weren't alone. He signaled for the team to halt, then activated the comms channel built into his helmet. "Control, this is Slayer Team Alpha. Do you copy?" Static crackled in response, followed by a faint voice. "Alpha. Disturbance detected. Recommend extraction." Before Ethan could respond, the transmission cut off abruptly. He exchanged a glance with Mia, who shook her head. "Something wasn't right. Let's keep moving," Ethan said. "But watch your backs." As they continued their search, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost suffocating. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, though none of them could pinpoint the source. Ryan started to lag behind, his breathing growing more labored. When Ethan turned to check on him, he saw the young man staring wide-eyed at something down the hall. "What is it?" Ethan demanded. I thought I saw something move," Ryan stammered. "Over there!" Without waiting for orders, Ryan raised his rifle and fired blindly into the darkness. The shot echoed loudly, startling everyone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low growl reverberated through the corridor, sending chills down their spines. "Damn it, Ryan," Jake hissed. "You trying to get us killed?" Before anyone could react further, the lights flickered violently, plunging them into near-total darkness. Panic set in as the growling grew louder, accompanied by the sound of skittering footsteps closing in from all directions. "Fall back!" Ethan shouted, grabbing Ryan by the arm and pulling him toward the nearest doorway. The team scrambled. To regroup, their weapons trained on the shadows that seemed alive with movement. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The lights returned to their dim state, leaving the Slayers standing in stunned silence. "What the hell was that?" Laura whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he stared into the darkness, his mind racing. Whatever they were dealing with, it was unlike anything they'd faced before. And they were running out of time to figure it out.